Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. I hope everybody had a nice weekend. I have a variety of things to talk about here today in no particular order. And certainly once we get to the end, if anybody has questions, I'm certainly happy to take those. I want to do a couple of acknowledgments as we start. We have Alderman Russell, who is here today, and Sandra Nichols, who's in our legal department, and Becky Kaler from our economic development department. We had our FreeCycle Roundup on Saturday, so hot off the presses. I've gotten some numbers on how that project went. According to our public works staff, it was the most successful FreeCycle Roundup that the city has done to date. We had 340 total loads come to the public works yard. 270 of those were FreeCycle and shredding. 70 of those were shred only. We were able to take about almost 8,000 pounds of what was picked up that day and recycle that ourselves with reliable recycling and get a little bit of funds back. And the total cost to the city, when you add up the man hours and the equipment and all those sorts of things, net of the recycling was about $12,000. So about $1,256.44 in tipping fees paid for what came in. So that has been an effort now that we've been doing for almost 8 years, a substitute for the prior bulk trash collection. I continue to hear requests on an ongoing basis from folks about when we're going to bring back bulk trash pickup. Since I think the question is probably inevitable, when are we going to bring back bulk trash pickup? What I'll say is I plan on sitting down very soon with the public works staff, look at these numbers and a little bit more data, and try and determine if there are anything we need to do to tweak with regards to the FreeCycle program, if there are any things that we can do that could perhaps enhance participation, ways in which we could expand the number of nonprofits or community organizations to look at, and whether or not there isn't a way to provide some sort of a curbside service in a way that, from my perspective, would have to look substantially different than the old bulk trash pickup the way we did it. So it's a conversation we have to continue to have. We are committed in the city of Frederick to trying to be sustainable in our approach to what it is that we do. I would argue that the old bulk trash program was not a sustainable waste management tool. There may be ways in which we can make it a more sustainable waste management tool, but those are conversations that we have to have with our staff and with our Department of Public Works and really the community to try and figure out how to do it best. My experience from the old bulk trash program was an awful lot of stuff that was recyclable ended up going to the dump, and I just don't think that that's a program that we want to try and promote. So I'm sure that there are ways in which we can improve what we are doing, and we will continue to look at ways in which we can provide the services that our residents are asking for, because I think that's part of our responsibility as a city. But we have to do that in a way that's financially responsible, socially responsible, environmentally responsible. And the FreeCycle Roundup is one way that moves us in that direction, but I'm open to the conversation about how we can do a little bit more. I wanted to give a specific shout out to a couple of members of our public works staff, certainly everyone who works in the sanitation department, but specifically to Zach Flegel and Mike Winpegler and Tammy Allball, Maurice Boyd, Mike Lyles, and Sean Walsh for their efforts yesterday, or Saturday with the FreeCycle Roundup. So look for another one of those in the fall. In the meantime, we'll continue to carry on internal conversations about ways in which we can do more with that program. Last Monday, a week ago, we had the interim report that came from our Strategic Opportunities Advisory Team work groups, and I was very pleased with the updates that were received. I'm not going to take a lot of time here today to go through everything that was said by each one of those work groups, but I did want to highlight in a couple of areas, I guess from each of the work groups, some specific things that stood out to me because I thought they were particularly interesting and really helped to provide the framework for what those advisory teams are going to be able to do when we get to June, and then how that will inform the efforts of the city and what we do from a strategic planning standpoint moving forward. Of interest to me particularly was several comments with regards to our Neighborhood Advisory Council process, and a strong desire on the part of our residents and really our NAC coordinators to see that program elevated to a higher level moving forward. And so I think there's tremendous opportunity for our NACs to be a stronger partner with what it is that we're trying to accomplish at the administrative level and how they can do that. The notion that, which one of the things that came out of the that was civic engagement. One of the things that came out of the 21st Century Technology and Communication Work Group was this notion of how do I identify in meaningful ways what the public wants and then to prioritize those. So we are attempting to work on some of that at the staff level in terms of the internal work plans that staff have developed, whether it's in planning or in human resources, to really come up with some standards that we can use internally to measure the effectiveness of various proposals and ideas that come forward, and how we can then rank those and present those to the Board of Aldermen. So the Board of Aldermen can have a say in the prioritizing of the projects that we're working on across various departments and really know why that list has been structured the way it is. Very often what happens now is when a new idea comes forward, it just sort of lands in the pot with everything else that's in there, and trying to decide which one should get pulled out first. Sometimes it's first one in is the first one out. There's probably a better way for us to organize the work products within our department so that we can really measure the impact of the work that we're doing and prioritize them in a way that makes sense. And I'm committed to also having the Board of Aldermen be a part of that process once we have those lists developed internally, because that then can reflect the way the public can see what it is that we're doing. And if we're not sort of minimally transparent in that regard, there often can be questions about, well, what's happening? And I think this is a way that we can do a better job of telling the community what's happening. In the area of economic resilience, I think there's a lot to be said for the high level of professional expertise. It's a lot of community on the other groups, but that group in particular has really brought in a high level of professional expertise in the financial and budgeting area to look at the finances of the city of Frederick. And I'm just impressed with their approach, their very systematic approach to that. And frankly, the early report being that the city is positioned and structured quite well budgetarily and financially, that we're doing a good job, and that's it's borne out a little bit by the string of awards that both our budget director, Katie Barkdahl, and our finance director, Jerry Coldflesh, have received over the years in terms of their efforts in government finance and accounting practices and the awards that we've received in that regard. In the expanding opportunities area, I was struck most by the idea, and it really gets at the heart of how we bring more people into the process of we don't know not only what we don't know, but more importantly, we don't know who we don't know, because we don't know who's out in the community right now that would like to be involved in what it is that we're doing and more active and engaged with maybe our NACs or our boards and commissions or just in the community in general, but for whatever reason, there is a disconnect, whether that disconnect is economic, whether that disconnect is because of language, whether that disconnect is because of the way the city communicates things out to the community. I'm struck by the idea that there's more that we need to do to learn more about the people that we don't know in our city. And then lastly, in the operations and organizational area, the idea of training for our staff, and it's something that we've talked about internally a little bit in terms of better developing career pathing opportunities in the city of Frederick. A number of years ago, prior to the 60th administration, when there was a change in the way in which the pay of the city was structured, and we went from a grade and step system to a pay for performance, it took some of the predictability out of the career path that employees could be on away. And if you're going to make that kind of a switch, you have to be committed to funding then the pay per performance, and there was a period of time where that didn't occur as well. And I think we need to go backwards a little bit to try and get back to an environment where we've developed the structures internally to allow our employees to know what their career path can look like within the city of Frederick. For some, they may still arrive at the decision someday that a better opportunity awaits elsewhere, but I don't want that to be the result of the fact that we haven't done what we need to do in the city of Frederick from a training and a development standpoint to provide our employees with the tools that they need to stay here. I say it in public settings time after time. 80% of what it is that we do as a city, probably more than that, is because we have employees who are on staff to do it. They are the deliverers of services to our residents, the services that our residents demand. And we have to work hard every day to make sure that we retain a high quality of employee, because that high quality of employee is going to be best at delivering that high quality of service for our residents. Last week, we had the organizational meeting of the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Review Panel, and it was as best as I can describe it, a very engaged and robust conversation amongst the individuals that we've invited to participate in that. And there will certainly be more to say about that in the future. This was very preliminary. We are preparing the data to send to them so that they have some initial information to work off of. The next meeting of that panel is scheduled for Tuesday, May 1st at 9 o'clock here in City Hall in room 212. And so I'm very excited about what I think that Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Review Panel can provide to the City of Frederick, and particularly grateful for the efforts of Katie Barkdahl, Keisha Brown, our Economic Development Office, Mary Ford Nail, for their participation in it, and Alderman Derek Shackelford, who is serving as the Board of Aldermen liaison to that group. I've received a number of emails just in the last week and questions out at a community event on Saturday of people who have seen the story and want to know what more they can do to find out about how they can become involved. And I think this is testament in some respects to the prior conversation about we don't know who we don't know. These are individuals that would like to find out how they can become better engaged in the procurement process in the city of Frederick, and it just hasn't been there, and this review panel may be a way in which that can occur. A couple of project updates. Monocacy Boulevard overpass on Route 15. I was with Alderman Russell on Friday at the Transportation Services Advisory Committee, and they provided an update on the status of that project. 3/4 of the interchange and the bridge are anticipated to be open by the end of May. And that may be a little bit curious, why 3/4 of the interchange and a bridge? There is one movement, the northbound exit ramp, that will not be ready until summer, but the bridge and 3/4 of the other movements, the northbound 15, I guess you'd call it the entrance ramp to northbound 15, and then both of the southbound 15 movements. At the time that those three movements in the bridge opened, the intersection, the left turn onto Hayward Road and the right turn if you're coming southbound on Hayward Road would close. So all of that is coming in May. If you are driving in the vicinity of Possumtown Pike northbound, you may have also noticed the message boards that indicate that a four-way stop is coming soon to the intersection of Christopher's Crossing and Possumtown Pike, and that is all part of the anticipation of the additional traffic that will be coming into that corridor as a result of the interchange being opened. And so in an effort to ensure that there is safe pedestrian and bicycle transportation infrastructure in that area, the stop signs are going up. Eventually there will be an intersection, a signalized intersection there, traffic lights. There is funding proposed in the fiscal 19 budget to do the engineering work and some of the construction on that. There is an entire series of corridor improvements along Christopher's Crossing that will be coming now as a result of that interchange being opened. There is a shared use path project, the next phase of the shared use path project through Baker Park, which is going to get going here in spring. The area from Color Lake to Fairview Avenue, so it runs behind the Little League ball diamond there. Demolishing, there's an existing narrow sunken path that will be new, installed 10 to 12 foot asphalt path. There is drainage improvements and things being done there. A lot of this work is being accomplished through the efforts of Friends of Baker Park and grant funding that they've been able to secure, but there's also some in-kind contributions that Frederick County is providing into that project as well, in addition to the work that our staff does on that. So there will be more information about that project coming soon. I wanted to provide a quick update on my trip to Charlottesville last Friday. It was a whirlwind. I arrived late on Thursday afternoon and then had an opportunity to participate in a full day of workshops on Friday before returning back to Frederick on Saturday morning. I want to give thanks to the Frederick County Chamber of Commerce that was really the spearheading organization behind that, but also Frederick County Office of Economic Development, Tourism Council of Frederick County, the Downtown Frederick Partnership, and then 3 private sector entities that were prominently featured through panels at that, it's called the Tom Tom Festival in Charlottesville, named for Thomas Jefferson, Leidos Biomedical, Frederick Memorial Hospital, and Yakabad. I had the opportunity to participate on a panel with Elizabeth Cromwell from the Chamber, Helen Profiter from Economic Development, and Scott Reiser from Yakabad. And it was a chance for the city of Frederick in that environment to tell the story of partnership and collaboration. There was an emphasis on Root, the new building on North Market Street that houses the Chamber and the FITSE Innovative Technology Center information technology component of what they do, and the county's Office of Economic Development, along with some other partners, Crest and Hood College. And it was really interesting because we got a number of questions from economic development officials from down in the Charlottesville, Albemarle County, Virginia area, wondering why Frederick, Maryland was in Charlottesville, if we were down there to steal their jobs and take their businesses away from them. And we assured them that we weren't, unless they want to come to Frederick, in which we're happy to have them. But it was really just a great opportunity to showcase the city to an area that is really close by, that feels a lot like Frederick in many respects. It's smaller than we are. Charlottesville is a city of about 50,000 people, as opposed to Frederick with 70,000 people. But the presence of the university in Charlottesville makes an enormous difference, the University of Virginia, in terms of the feel of that community and what they're trying to do. So for 7 years, they've been doing this festival, and it was really exciting for the city to be involved. Personally, I had the opportunity on Friday to also attend sessions on citizen-centered design. It was a case study on what they're doing in Gainesville, Florida, to really put citizens at the center of their government operations, and I was very intrigued by some of their ideas, most notably the way in which they presented their organizational chart that did not look like the typical residents at the top, elected officials, top-down kind of approach that you see in most instances, but was really designed more like a solar system, with the residents at the middle of that solar system and everything sort of spanning out from that. And so it's something that I want to look into in more detail. I attended a session on using data to make government decisions. The presenter was a young woman who works at the Center for Government Excellence, which is funded in part by Bloomberg Philanthropies, and I had an opportunity to meet a representative from Bloomberg Philanthropies. But the Center for Government Excellence is located at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore. So I think the city's proximity to Baltimore and that center provides some opportunities as we explore more about ways in which we can use that to our benefit. I wanted to quickly provide as well sort of an update on where we are in the budget process. So we're about halfway through our public hearing efforts now. We will have 4 of 7 this evening with our Department of Public Works Operations Division and our Capital Improvements Program. We have gotten the latest and what we think are the final numbers on highway user revenues for fiscal year 19. And so I did just want to take a moment to say that we're certainly appreciative of the efforts that were done by Senator Rich Madaleno on the Senate side and Delegate Carl Anderton on the House side, because they were the spearheading sponsors of one of the bills that was put in to deal with highway user revenue. It turned out to be the preferred bill of the Maryland Municipal League, though we supported all of the highway user revenue bills that came through that process. The city is looking to get a little over $2 million in fiscal 19, $2,034,150. And that is about a $278,000 increase over our funding from fiscal year 18. But the most important thing that came out of the conversations in the General Assembly on the highway user revenues was the stabilizing of that funding stream for at least the next 5 years. What we have been battling over the last 5 years, over the last 8 years really, has been this, the precipitous cut from more than $3 million of funding to the city of Frederick down to about $200,000, and the need every year to try and beg and cajole either the governor or the legislature to put some of that funding back in the budget at some point. What passed this year was a bill that actually creates a stable formula and funding source for the next 5 years, and that gives us 5 years to look for a more long-term strategy, a long-term strategy that's going to be necessary in large part because gas tax revenues, which are the primary funder of transportation projects, and highway user revenues for the city of Frederick are drying up. They're not going to continue to go up as we move into a world of hybrid and electric cars as those become more prevalent. So we're going to have to look long-term at what our transportation funding infrastructure is going to look like. It cannot look like what it looked like a decade ago or 20 years ago. So I don't want to say that the loss of highway user revenues in any way represents something good for the city. It certainly hasn't been. The loss of the 20+ million over the last 8 years has had a demonstrable effect on our ability to do street maintenance projects. We've had to move forward with the ones that are most important, and that has meant resources get diverted from other things, so we're happy to see the money coming back. But if the result of all of these conversations moving forward is that we'll have a more constructive conversation with the state about transportation projects, about our needs, it points a little bit to the work that the Transportation Planning Board and WashCog is doing on Visualize 2045. The interesting thing about that program is that jurisdictions were all asked if you could build everything, if money wasn't an object, what would the future look like? And I believe, if I'm quoting this correctly, the response is it will be less worse than it is right now. So I'm not sure that less worse doesn't mean better. It just means less worse. And we have to work for something that will actually be better. There is some continued staff and Board of Aldermen conversation on proposed senior tax credit. One of the substantial changes that I've seen in some of the exchanges that have been occurring over the last week since that presentation came to the Board of Aldermen is a clarification of what the 25% tax credit is really going to be. The proposal that came forward at the workshop was a 25% credit on the state's tax credit. What the intention is a 25% credit on the city's property tax bill, which is a very different number. And so the draft ordinance is being rewritten to incorporate that new change. What has been difficult in this process, and we've gotten some questions from some members of the Board of Aldermen, is the price tag for it, and it's just really difficult to pin down. We're relying on the numbers based on the program that's in place now at the county and the people who are using that tax credit, and that's about 370 or so folks. It will probably go up with one more jurisdiction being involved, but we have no idea how much. So there's some projecting being done on what a 10% annual increase in the number of participants in that program would look like. I would only make one other observation about it because I heard this twice over the weekend as well at functions that I've been to, is that whatever we're looking at doing to help our aging population in the city of Frederick, a senior property tax credit that is really limited to only those seniors who are property owners in the city of Frederick is very limiting. And we need to do more exploration as a city about other ways in which we can look at our programs and services that we provide to provide assistance to our senior citizens. We can't allow a senior property tax credit to be the only thing that we do, because it probably, while it has certain benefit to a certain demographic, based on age and income, it is not nearly as broad, or does not touch as broad a population as we're going to need to look at moving forward. So those will be conversations. I've said throughout the budget process and in other settings that the budget is one tool that we have available to us. The senior property tax credit will not impact the fiscal 19 budget. If it's adopted, it would not impact the budget until fiscal 20. But we have time between now and then to even have a broader conversation about the policy conversations that are necessary in order to have a more complete way of looking at how we help our seniors. I don't want to take up too much more time, so I'll just make a couple of notes about some things that are upcoming. May 18th is Bike to Work Day in the city of Frederick, and so you are strongly encouraged, if you have not registered already for Bike to Work Day, to please do that. There will be a ceremonial ride that starts at Alumni Hall at Hood College and will wind its way to City Hall and then ultimately to the MARC station. The MARC is providing on that day, so we have to be really tight with our time schedule, I understand. They're providing a car that you will be able to take your bicycle on. And so in order to meet that particular MARC train departing downtown Frederick at 7:10, we have to be really sharp, I think, with our timing that day, not meander too much, but it will be an opportunity, if you want to try that as a commuter, to bring your bike to the train station, put it on the train, and take it with you to your job down in Washington. That will be an option. So that's always a great day. We'll hope for great weather. I don't look too far ahead on whether the forecast says rain or snow or whatever we might get on May the 18th. Who knows? But it'll be a great day. And the last thing that I wanted to make mention of is the the Wyland Foundation Water Conservation Challenge, which is still ongoing throughout the month of April. And so if you have not gone to www.mywaterpledge.com, please do. It's an opportunity for you as a resident to see the different ways in which you can make a commitment to help preserve and conserve the water resources of the city of Frederick. And there's an opportunity, if enough city residents participate in that, then we get a great shout out through that foundation, and the city of Frederick gets recognized for being a community that is committed to sustainability and water conservation. So with that, I will conclude my more or less prepared remarks and afford an opportunity for anybody who has any questions to fire away. I'll make one final announcement that on Friday, this coming Friday, on April 27th, we're going to have the second of our Q&As with the mayor. We're calling it Fourth Friday with the Mayor. This continues to be a work in progress because we're hearing feedback from people that Fridays may not be the best day, early in the morning might not be the best day. And so I think moving forward, we'll probably figure out how we can move it around to different days and different day parts so that we can afford as many people an opportunity to be involved with that as possible. That Fourth Friday with the Mayor for this month will be April 27th at the Mountain View Diner, which is on Route 40 West, from 7:30 a.m. until roughly 9 o'clock in the morning. It's 1300 West Patrick Street. We have put information out there. There's a link on the city's website that if you'd like to actually schedule a time within that time window. We had a number of folks who showed up at the beginning of the one that we did in February, and they waited for an hour and a half to sit down and have a chance to talk with me. And so we're going to try a scheduling thing and see if that doesn't provide a little more opportunity for folks to maybe come in and not have to use quite as much time in order to sit down. But that's an open conversation, really a one-on-one opportunity to talk about anything that's on your mind. So I certainly appreciate your participation here today, and we look forward on a regular basis to continuing to provide these briefings about what's happening in the city of Frederick. So thank you, and have a wonderful week.